The fluorescent lights buzzed above the break room like angry wasps. I stood in front of the schedule board, staring at my name. Jack Hollow. Last week, my shifts filled the entire row, 45 hours, solid and dependable. This week, my name appeared in only 3 tiny boxes. 25 hours total. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my ribs. Around me, other workers whispered and avoided my eyes. I could feel their pity like heat on my back. "Hey, Mark," I said, my voice coming out shakier than I wanted. "Why did you cut my hours?" My boss didn't even look up from his clipboard. He just kept writing, his pen scratching across the paper. "Overtime's expensive, Jack. Someone's gotta take the hit. Company policy." A few guys near the coffee machine snickered. My face burned hot. Mark finally glanced up, his eyes cold and flat. "Besides," he added with a thin smile, "maybe if you worked smarter instead of longer, we wouldn't have this problem." More laughter. I forced myself to nod and walked out before anyone could see my hands shaking. My name is Jack Hollow. And this is the story of how my boss tried to break me, until I made him destroy himself. The drive home felt longer than usual. I kept the radio off. The silence pressed against my ears. Mark's words played over and over in my head. Trim the fat, work smarter, take the hit. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Rent was due in 8 days. My wife, Angela, was 6 months pregnant. We'd been saving every penny for the baby. Now those 20 hours he cut meant $400 gone. Just like that. $400 we desperately needed. I pulled into our driveway and sat in the car for 10 minutes, trying to breathe normally. Through the kitchen window, I could see Angela moving around, probably making dinner. She was always so strong, so positive. How was I supposed to tell her that the man who called me irreplaceable last month just made me disposable? 6 months earlier, everything was different. Back then Mark loved me. Or at least he pretended to. The warehouse was always short-staffed, and I stayed late every single night to cover the gaps. I fixed broken conveyor belts with duct tape and determination. I trained every new hire, teaching them the system Mark was too lazy to explain. When the overnight supervisor quit without notice, I worked 3 straight Saturdays, unpaid, because Mark called it team loyalty and promised it would pay off big time. "Jack, you're the backbone of this operation," he told me one Friday evening, clapping my shoulder. "I don't know what I'd do without you, buddy." I believed him. I actually believed him. The next week's morning meeting felt like a public execution. 20 of us stood in a half circle on the warehouse floor, safety vests bright under the harsh lights. Mark held his clipboard like a weapon. He cleared his throat dramatically. "Some people," he announced, looking straight at me, "seem to think overtime is a right instead of a privilege. Maybe if certain employees worked smarter instead of just racking up hours, we wouldn't need to make these tough decisions." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. A few people laughed nervously. Others stared at their boots. I stood there, frozen, my face burning. These were people I'd trained. People I'd helped. And now they were watching me get humiliated. I forced myself to smile and nod, but inside, something snapped. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. Mark had just crossed a line he didn't know existed. Instead of quitting like Mark probably expected, I started watching. Really watching. For the next week, I paid attention to everything happening around me. Mark's nephew, Tyler, clocked in every morning at 7 but didn't actually start working until 8. He spent that first hour in his truck, playing on his phone. Nobody said anything because he was family. The loading crew was told to arrive 15 minutes early for prep work, but forbidden from clocking in until their official start time. That was 15 minutes of free labor, 5 days a week. Multiply that by 12 workers, and Mark was stealing an hour and a half of paid time every single day. During mandatory safety meetings, Mark would say, "Don't clock in for this, it's just a quick chat." Those quick chats lasted 30 minutes. Again, free labor. I started doing the math in my head. The numbers were staggering. That Friday night, I stopped at a drugstore and bought a small spiral notebook with a blue cover. It cost $50. At home, while Angela slept, I sat at our kitchen table under the dim light and opened to the first page. At the top, I wrote, Documentation Log, Start Date, October 3rd. Then I began recording everything. Every illegal instruction. Every stolen minute. Every time Mark told someone to work off the clock. I wrote dates, times, and exact quotes. If he wants to play games, I whispered to myself, pen scratching across the page, I'll play chess. And I'm very, very patient. Mark's treatment of me got worse. It was like he sensed I wasn't breaking fast enough, so he pushed harder. He started giving me impossible tasks designed to make me fail. Jack, move these 6 pallets to bay 12. By yourself. You've got 20 minutes. 6 fully loaded pallets weighed over a ton each. One person couldn't safely move them in an hour, let alone 20 minutes. When I asked for help, Mark shook his head. Everyone else is busy. Figure it out. I did figure it out. I worked through my lunch break, skipped my afternoon break, and stayed late. Then Mark told me to log it as regular time. When I hesitated, he leaned close, his breath smelling like coffee and something sour. You should be grateful, Hollow. Some folks around here got 0 hours right now. Don't make me rethink your schedule completely. I nodded slowly, swallowed my anger like bitter medicine, and kept writing in my notebook every night. Friday evening, 2 weeks later, my paycheck was deposited. I checked my bank account on my phone while sitting in my car after my shift. My stomach dropped. It was half what I expected. Literally half. I stared at the number, refreshing the app 3 times like it might change. When I got home, Angela was sitting at the kitchen table with our bills spread out in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, hopeful in her eyes. How much came through? I couldn't speak. I just showed her my phone. Her face crumpled. Not angry, just defeated. She put both hands on her pregnant belly, protective and automatic. How long can you take this, Jack? She whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. I didn't have an answer. But something in my chest hardened into steel. I kissed her forehead and went to our bedroom. I pulled out my notebook and added 3 more pages of documentation. My handwriting was perfectly steady. That weekend I barely slept. Instead, I sat up at night reading the Federal Labor Code on my laptop, the blue light making my eyes ache. I learned about the Fair Labor Standards Act. I learned what constituted wage theft. I learned about the Department of Labor's Enforcement Division and how they handled complaints. I learned about penalties. Companies could be forced to pay double the stolen wages as punishment. I took screenshots. I bookmarked pages. I made notes in the margins of my notebook. Knowledge became my weapon, quiet and sharp. I didn't call anyone yet. I didn't file anything. I just gathered information like a man stacking sandbags before a flood. The following Saturday, Mark scheduled a mandatory safety meeting at the warehouse. 8 in the morning. Don't clock in, he told everyone via group text. This is just a quick refresher. 30 minutes tops. I showed up with my phone in my shirt pocket, camera lens pointing out, recording everything. The meeting lasted 47 minutes. Mark spent most of it lecturing us about personal accountability and not taking advantage of company resources. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. After the meeting, I sat in my car and backed up the video file to 3 different places: my laptop, a USB drive, and a cloud storage account I created just for this purpose. I was building a case that Mark didn't even know existed. 2 weeks later, Mark suddenly became friendly. It was jarring, like watching a snake smile. He caught me in the parking lot after my shift. Hey Jack, got a minute? Let me buy you a beer. Bury the hatchet, you know? No hard feelings about the hours thing, right? Every instinct screamed trap, but I needed to see where this was going. Sure, boss. No hard feelings. We went to a sports bar 3 blocks from the warehouse. Mark ordered 2 beers and started talking, rambling, really, about company pressure and budget cuts. He was trying to make me feel sorry for him. Between you and me, he said, leaning across the sticky table, corporate's breathing down my neck about labor costs. I'm just trying to keep us all employed, you know. Under the table, my phone was recording every word. I nodded sympathetically and let him talk. He hung himself with his own rope, and he had no idea. The following Monday, a new worker named Pete got hurt. He was 22, fresh out of community college, trying to save money for his own place. Mark told him to move a heavy equipment box from receiving to the back storage area. Alone. The box weighed at least 200 pounds. He tried. The box shifted and he wrenched his back badly. He went down hard, his face gray with pain. Mark rushed over, but not to help Pete, to control the situation. "You're fine," Mark said quickly, helping Pete stand even though Pete was clearly not fine. "Just walk it off. And listen, if anyone asks, you hurt yourself at home, got it? We don't need OSHA sniffing around here." Mark looked around at the rest of us. Anyone reports this and I start cutting schedules again. Permanently. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Everyone went back to work. Except me. I wrote down every single word that night in my notebook. Now I had a witness. Now I had someone who'd been harmed. Now I had real leverage. A week later, I asked Mark for help with logging my hours. I played dumb, pretending I couldn't figure out the computer system. He got impatient and took over the keyboard. "Look, it's simple," he muttered, clicking through screens. "You worked 43 hours this week, right? Just log 40. Corporations don't check this stuff closely. Keeps you under overtime threshold. Keeps me under budget. Everybody wins." He said it so casually, like it was normal. Like stealing from his employees was just good business. My phone, propped up in my shirt pocket with the lens barely visible, captured everything. His face. His voice. His confession. I had him. That night, after Angela fell asleep, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop and my notebook. My hands were perfectly steady. I navigated to the Department of Labor's website and found the complaint form. It took me 2 hours to fill out completely. I attached photos of doctor timecards. I attached transcripts of conversations. I uploaded the audio files. I included a detailed timeline going back 6 months. Before I hit submit, I paused. This was the point of no return. Once I filed this complaint, everything would change. I thought about Mark's smug face. I thought about Angela's tears. I thought about Pete's injured back. I thought about all the workers too scared to speak up. I clicked submit. The screen confirmed receipt of my anonymous complaint. Case number assigned. Investigation pending. I closed my laptop, crawled into bed beside my wife, and slept better than I had in months. 2 weeks passed. Nothing happened. I started wondering if my complaint had been buried in bureaucratic paperwork somewhere. Then, on a Tuesday morning, everything exploded. 3 people in business suits walked onto the warehouse floor carrying clipboards and briefcases. Behind them was someone from corporate headquarters. Department of Labor, one of the suits announced. "We're conducting a compliance audit. This is routine. Please continue working normally." It absolutely was not routine. I watched Mark's face drain of color. His usual confidence evaporated instantly. Sweat appeared on his forehead despite the cool warehouse air. He tried his fake charm, smiling and shaking hands, but his voice cracked when he talked. Of course. We're an open book here. Nothing to hide." The lead investigator, a woman with sharp eyes and silver hair, smiled back. It wasn't a friendly smile. "That's good to hear. We'll need to see all payroll records for the past 18 months. Time card documentation. Employee schedules. Safety incident reports. And we'll be conducting individual interviews." Mark's fake smile froze on his face. The first crack had appeared in his armor. Over the next 3 days, the investigators worked through the warehouse like surgeons. They interviewed workers one by one in a private office set up in the conference room. At first, people were scared and gave careful, vague answers. But then Pete went in, and he told them everything. About his back injury. About Mark's threats. About the culture of fear. After Pete, the dam broke. One by one, people started talking. Stories poured out about unpaid preparation time, shortened lunch breaks, mandatory off-the-clock meetings, and falsified time records. Mark's nephew Tyler was interviewed for 20 minutes and came out looking like he'd seen a ghost. He'd confessed to everything, probably hoping to save himself. The warehouse transformed from a place of scared silence into a place of angry whispering. Workers who'd been isolated and afraid suddenly realized they weren't alone. Mark's little empire of control was crumbling, and he knew it. On the fourth day, Mark cornered me in the loading bay. Everyone else was at lunch. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. He grabbed my shirt and pushed me against a stack of pallets. "You did this," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "I know it was you. You smug little—" "Let go of me," I said quietly. My voice was calm, but inside, my heart pounded. "You just destroyed this whole operation. You destroyed jobs. People's livelihoods. You think you're some kind of hero." I met his eyes without flinching. "I documented everything you did wrong. I followed the law. Maybe if you'd done the same, we wouldn't be here." Mark's fist rose, trembling with rage. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. Then footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. 2 investigators walked around the corner, clipboards in hand. Mark dropped his hand immediately, his face cycling through emotions: rage, fear, forced calm. "Just having a friendly chat," Mark said with a horrible fake smile. "Right, Jack?" I said nothing. The investigators looked between us, clearly not believing him. One of them made a note on her clipboard. Mark walked away, his shoulders rigid with fury. I stood there breathing slowly, forcing my hands to stop shaking. Friday afternoon, corporate headquarters made their decision. Mark was fired immediately. The announcement came via email to the whole warehouse, formal and cold. Effective immediately, Mark Brennan is no longer employed with this company. An interim manager will be assigned while we investigate and restructure. Mark was escorted from the building by security, carrying a small cardboard box of his personal items. He didn't look at anyone as he left. The silence that followed his departure was heavy and strange. People didn't celebrate, they just stood there, processing what had happened. Then came the second email. The Department of Labor's audit had uncovered widespread violations. The company was being fined $340,000. Every employee who'd been shorted pay would receive back wages plus penalty compensation. Checks would be issued within 30 days. I sat in my car in the parking lot and just breathed. Justice at last. It felt quieter than I expected. Not triumphant, just right. For weeks later, an envelope arrived at my house. Inside was a check for $8,200. Back pay for all the stolen hours, plus penalty wages as punishment to the company. I stared at the number. It was enough to clear our credit card debt. Enough to finish setting up the baby's room. Enough to breathe again. The next day, I got a phone call from a competing warehouse across town. They'd heard about the audit. Apparently word traveled fast in the industry. They offered me a position. Same work, but $3 more per hour, guaranteed 40 hours weekly, and a supervisor who actually respected labor law. I gave my 2 weeks' notice. On my last day, the new interim manager shook my hand and looked me in the eye. "I heard what you did," he said quietly. "It took guts. Things are going to be different here now." I believed him. But I was still leaving. My new job started the following Monday. The warehouse was cleaner, brighter. The schedule board had my name printed in solid blocks all week long. Jack Hollow, 40 hours, clear and dependable. I stood there for a moment just looking at it. That evening, I sat at home with Angela, her head on my shoulder, my hand on her belly where our baby kicked softly. She knew the whole story now. Every piece of it. "You could have just quit," she said softly. "Found another job. Why go through all that?" I thought about it for a while. Because he didn't just steal from me. He stole from everyone. And he got away with it for years because people were too scared to speak up. Someone had to stop him. She kissed my cheek. "You're a good man, Jack Hollow." Maybe I was. Or maybe I just understood something important. Mark cut my hours to save a few bucks. In the end, it cost him everything. His job. His reputation. Hundreds of thousands in fines. All because he thought I was powerless. He was wrong. If someone tries to devalue you, don't fight dirty. Don't scream. Don't quit in rage. Fight smart. Document everything. Know your worth. Know your rights. The truth is its own kind of weapon. Quiet, patient, and absolutely devastating when used correctly. I looked at the schedule board one more time, my name printed bold and clear. Jack Hollow. Full-time. Respected. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits, writes things down, and lets the truth do all the work.